Well, congratulations. You've read through the Apocrypha. And in doing so, I believe you've filled in a lot of pieces of the puzzle that are normally missing for people that haven't had the opportunity to read these wonderful writings. The book, by the way, has resources for application in the back of it that helps you with good questions. You see their guided questions at every chapter, but at the conclusion as well. And I want to just say a couple of things as we wrap up here that you can take with you here. As a reminder, you're filling in what happened during those 400 silent years between the time that the writings of the the Old Testament concluded and the beginning of the New Testament. What happened to God's people? What was the history, the legacy, what was written, and who were key figures during that period. Secondly, another important missing piece of the puzzle, how did they interpret Scripture? Because this is so influential in the times of the New Testament as we look at Paul's interpretation, as we look at the teachings of Jesus. All of that happened, either was influenced by or happened in the crucible, so to speak, of that teaching that went on during the intertestamental period. I said in an earlier video vignette, who were the John MacArthurs of their day, the David Jeremiahs, the John Pipers. And so you've begun to hear and understand a little bit more about what that teaching was like. And then just finally, what are the key figures in that history? Judas Maccabees, Judith, Tobit, other figures that were very influential, that the teachers of Jesus and James and Jude and the rest of the New Testament persons took them for granted. They knew their stories. They knew this background. The Sadducees, when they asked Jesus, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? They had this background under their belt. And now, to an extent, you've been introduced to this so that you can begin to understand that too. What was their legacy? The legacy of the Jews during this whole period. And so now you're in a better position, and you know where to find more about it, to understand who the Pharisees were and what their thinking was and why they acted like they did, why they loved the law so much. You can go back and read Tobit and get a really good take on that. The Sadducees and why they didn't believe the resurrection. And read the story of Sarah as that second part of the story of Tobit. You know the story of Judith and that background that says that a single person who's committed and sold out to the Lord can bring about a total reversal of circumstances, from oppression and being under the thumb of the enemy to complete deliverance. And you see the progression of that through an important progression, a progressive revelation of sorts through the book of the Apocrypha, or the chapters, the stories, the books of the Apocrypha. And so you read about Israel's deliverance as a whole, the deliverance, the rescue of the Jewish people. And then as we get toward the end, more individualistic stories. Before, it was Judas Maccabees and the whole Maccabees family and the whole clan and the army. Then it's Judith and her scheme to do away with the enemy commander. And then it's Tobit and Sarah and their prayers and their godly living in order to bring about deliverance from themselves. Tobit from blindness, Sarah from her affliction by a demon. And then Daniel's discernment. And then finally the individual wisdom and the crystallized, laser-focused conclusions of the sages, the wisdom of Solomon, and their proverbs that boil it all down. This is the legacy of late Judaism. It's the legacy of the 400 so-called silent years. The legacy of the Apocrypha, which was named, by the way, by Jerome, who, when he translated the Bible from Greek to Hebrew and to Latin, pulled these books aside and called them Apocrypha, hidden books. But they continued to be read in the early church. The earliest editions of the King James Bible included these books set aside on their own. Again, they weren't seen as equal to Scripture, and this project is not about trying to make any claim like that. They're just helpful to read. They're good background. They shed light on our understanding of the New Testament. They help us understand how the people of Jesus' day and before interpreted Scripture, and what stories they told, and what legacy they relied on, and how they came to rely on the idea of a Messiah as a conquering hero who would rescue Israel from its oppressors. So now you know these stories. You have the background, and the material in the back will help you go further to unpack those things and to answer those questions, with the goal all being that you'll understand your New Testament better. And in this case specifically, you'll understand more about Jewish spirituality. If we're left only with mystical spirituality or passive spirituality, we'll be leaving out an important component, Jewish spirituality. It's very dynamic, very active, very trusting of God's promise in history, and believing that they're called of God and acting on that promise by faith throughout history. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I think the Apocrypha is immensely interesting, fascinating to read, and it's very fruitful for our understanding. Thank you.